I have to say that obviously it is killing me to not be actually have 20 minutes to give my opinions, because I'm obviously so opinionated on everything. But I'm going to confine myself to saying that it has been such a pleasure. As I think Kevin had said earlier, and I think he had to rush off, it really did. There is a family of cycling that is really, we have to acknowledge the inclusivity of it and open ourselves up to a much greater range of people involved in cycling than perhaps we are representing ourselves as being as inclusive as we can be. And that's one of the nice things about this session, is that we're addressing some of the issues at the core of why we're here, and that's the whole issue of gender and cycling. And so to that end, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Teresa Lavin, who is from the Institute of Public Health. She is and as Kevin said before, we have to acknowledge, whether it's politically correct or not, we have to acknowledge that women as mothers play a huge role in opening us up to articulating some of the issues that affect how women cycle, how children cycle. And so it's not just about how it's good for us, it's about how we get more people cycling so it's good for all of our community. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Teresa Lavin.
So good afternoon everyone, and first of all I'd just like to thank the organisers for the invitation to speak at this conference. My presentation is based on this publication called Active Travel, Healthy Lives, which is available to download from our website, or if anyone would like a copy I'll be happy to send it to you. But this was produced last year, but it's really based on some earlier work that we did. Back in 2005 we produced a report called The Health Impacts of Transport, which was really about encouraging collaboration between the health and the transport sectors by highlighting areas of shared interest. And of course active travel is a prime example of that. That increasing physical activity isn't and improving health can't just be the responsibility of the health sector alone, so it's about collaborating with various bodies for areas of mutual benefit. To set the context, I'd just like to start with giving you an overview of some health issues that we're facing in Ireland today. So the good news, as you can see from this slide, is that our life expectancy is increasing. This just shows the life expectancy for men and for women from 1981 to 2006. And you can see there for a man, so being very gender biased, the men are in blue and the women are in red, pink. A man born in, or a boy born in 1981 could expect to live to about 70 years. By 2006 this has increased to just under 77 years, so a fairly significant increase in life expectancy in those 25 years. Similar trend for women, but as you can see the gap between men and women persists at about 5 years. Now this is by no means unique to Ireland. It's a phenomenon that's really seen in most other developed countries. However, if you look at the issue of healthy life expectancy, and healthy life expectancy is the number of years that a person can expect to live in good health, it's quite a different trend that emerges. This slide just shows healthy life years as a percentage of overall life expectancy at age 65 in Ireland, going from 2004 up to 2010. And I suppose, again, positive thing that the percentage of years that both men and women can expect to live in good health is on the increase. But what's different here is that it's increasing at a much faster pace for men. So over those 6-7 years, there's been an increase of about 2.6 years for men compared to about 1.5 years for women. And then just looking at, well, chronic disease accounts for a significant proportion of those unhealthy life years. So what are the main issues that are causing us to be unhealthy, particularly in our later years? So again, this slide is just showing 3 different age groups, from 55 to 64, from 65 to 69 and 70 plus. And you can see that some fairly staggering statistics straight away, that about a quarter of people in the 65 to 69 age group have high cholesterol. About a third of the population over 70 have high blood pressure. What's more worrying is that this is likely to be a vast underestimate of the true profile. We know from work that we have done within the Institute that there's a significant amount of undiagnosed diabetes, for a start, in the population currently, but also from some modelling work we've done that the increase across a range of chronic diseases, not only diabetes but also things like asthma, blood pressure, cholesterol, is set to increase by about 40% in the next 8 to 10 years unless we do something. So much of our chronic disease is blamed on lifestyle factors, or so-called lifestyle factors, and we hear a lot about this. And there is some truth in it. Certainly if you smoke, if you have a diet high in processed food, high in fat, salt and sugar, if you don't exercise, you're not doing much to improve your health. But I think what this slide does is it puts it in a much broader perspective, and it shows that very, very many issues actually impact on our health and well-being. Some of you will be familiar, but if you're not, I might just take a minute just to explain the slide. That at the centre, it acknowledges that factors like age, gender and your genes obviously do have an impact on your ability to live a healthy life. And the next ring, if you like, is lifestyle issues. So again, talking about those things: smoking, alcohol, exercise, diet and so on. But then it goes into some of the more interesting stuff, if you like. The impact of where you live and the kind of social networks that you have and the kind of participation that you either have the opportunity or you avail of in terms of what's going on in your local neighbourhood. And then looking at things like the local economy and access to services and markets and opportunities for employment and education. Going broader still, then looking at things like general activities of daily living, if you like: living, working, playing, shopping, moving around. And then looking at factors like the built environment, how our streets are constructed, how buildings influence our health, and networks, different routes. Looking then at the natural environment, the quality of our air, our water, our soil, access to green spaces. And then broader again, looking at things in the global ecosystem, things like climate change, biodiversity and so on. So hopefully by this it's clear that improving people's health is not the responsibility of the health sector alone. And this is basically a fundamental principle of our work within the Institute. And then looking more specifically at today's topic around cycling and increasing participation in cycling, it really does require an understanding that it's much more than just a lifestyle choice, that many factors in our physical and our social environment influence that choice. So just to give you an outline of the report, we started off with the definition of active travel because we wanted to differentiate between travel to get from A to B as opposed to recreational walking or cycling. We did look in the report at things like current levels of active travel and factors that influence. I wasn't going to touch on those because I sense, although unfortunately I missed this morning's session, they would have been well covered already. But what I do want to focus on mostly is the health impacts, the health consequences, both positive and negative, of increasing active travel, particularly cycling. I'll touch on some of the economic benefits, which can be another argument for increasing active travel, and then finish up with just some suggested actions. So this is a fairly busy slide, I suppose, just showing the good, the bad and the ugly of cycling in Dublin or anywhere else. I'm going to focus in particular on physical activity, road traffic collisions and air quality. And I suppose just to differentiate between those, really, if you're talking about increased physical activity, it's a quick win for the individual. Even if you're the only person walking or cycling, you're increasing your own physical activity with subsequent health benefits, which I'll go through in more detail in a moment. But the other is particularly around air quality and road traffic crashes. It really requires a population shift in mode of transport to really bring about any benefits to health. And I'll show that in my slides as well. In terms of physical activity is probably one of the best things you can do to improve your health. It has such a wide range of benefits that I could stand up and talk for the rest of the day about them alone, but certainly very, very strong links to cancer, to heart disease, which are the two big causes of death in Ireland today. largely through maintaining a healthy weight, and that's critical at the moment given that half of the adults in Ireland are overweight or obese. A quarter of children are also overweight or obese. But I think it's important to just remember that even people of a healthy weight who are inactive are at increased risk of cancer, osteoporosis, poor mental health and so on. So physical activity has a standalone benefit over and above its contribution to maintaining a healthy weight. Our national guidelines on physical activity recommend that children are active for at least 60 minutes every day of the week, that adults are active for at least 30 minutes moderate activity 5 or more days a week. All our surveys showed that only about half the population are anywhere near meeting these recommendations. So a huge amount of the population would fall very much into the sedentary lifestyle. And we know from all the evidence that really the best way to increase and maintain your levels of physical activity is to incorporate it into everyday life. I think one of the problems and one of the reasons we're seeing such a reduction in physical activity is that it's become associated with something that we do at a particular place in a particular time. So just think about, people that cycle to the gym and maybe even get the lift up to the first floor where the gym is located instead of taking the stairs. So we just really need to be thinking of using the journey as well as the destination to get our activity in. A slide that you've possibly already seen or will be quite familiar with, I imagine, and unfortunately my stats stop at 2009, but you can see a general trend here that pedestrians and cyclists are unfortunately very vulnerable road users, and they account, even though the numbers have changed, for around a fifth of all road deaths in Ireland at the moment. And then this slide just breaks down both into pedestrians and cyclists, but also into Ireland and County Dublin. And two things. First of all, you can see that although the overall percentage of both pedestrians and cyclists has remained around the same, the good news if you're a cyclist is that injuries and deaths have decreased. The bad news if you're a pedestrian is that they've increased. And I suppose the other thing to draw your attention to is a significant proportion, and again this is has remained unchanged throughout the years, are in Dublin. But then when you think of the relatively large population and the fact that it's city-based, there are likely to be far more people walking and cycling in County Dublin than the rest of the country. I suppose the good news to point out, and again very strong from the evidence, is that in countries where there are higher percentages of people walking and cycling, the trend is actually reversed, that you see fewer road traffic injuries and deaths. And I suppose this can be related to a number of reasons. One is around safety in numbers effect, that through driver awareness, becoming more used to and expecting to have cyclists and pedestrians around, drivers can and will and have been shown to modify their behaviour. And certainly if there's more of an ethos on cycling and walking as being the norm, policy can help. And I suppose we can witness the change even in Dublin city centre since the introduction of the restrictions on the HGV and the reductions in speed limits. So the final health issue that I want to talk about is air quality. And I suppose even unlike road traffic injuries, where cyclists and pedestrians can sometimes contribute to the statistics, really in the case of air quality, cyclists aren't contributing to air pollution, but they're certainly exposed to it. And it does carry an increased risk, particularly of heart and lung disease. And even just last week, the World Health Organization published new findings showing a strong link between diesel fume and increased risk of lung and bladder cancer. We hear a lot about the effect of large vehicles, HGVs and so on, and their impact on air pollution. But of course the shorter journeys as well, which are the ones that are really most amenable to changing people from using their car to those short journeys for walking and cycling, they contribute more per kilometre to greenhouse gas emissions than longer journeys. And the picture, in case you're wondering, was a winning entry in a competition among school children on a theme of how to improve air quality. So the kids know what to do. So just want to bring your attention to, I suppose, another area that can help to I suppose, certainly increase policymakers' interest in the whole area of why they should be supporting active travel. So when I talk about the economic benefits of active travel, I'm purely talking about the economic benefits through improving people's health and how this subsequently impacts on the economy. And recently there's been a new tool developed by the World Health Organization called the Health Economic Assessment Tool, which kind of adds to the tools that can be used. We're fairly well familiar with tools that can be used to calculate the costs of road traffic collisions and the costs of air and noise pollution. But this is another tool that can be used, and basically you can apply it before and after an intervention to increase walking and cycling, and it will plug in what the predicted savings to the health and social care budgets are around improved physical activity and how that impacts on health. And we're hoping to apply that for the first time to a project in Ireland later this year. But I suppose it's important to say that it's not just about savings directly to healthcare, but it's also about savings to the social welfare budget, because obviously as people who are suffering from chronic disease are not able to be employed, they're more likely to be on sickness benefit. And at the moment, the sickness benefit in Ireland costs around 2 billion per year. So obviously, any impact we can make on that, I'm sure would be most welcome. So I'm going to conclude just with some suggestions, I suppose, or some recommendations that we had in the report on how active travel can be improved and increased. And the first one is around, I suppose, core to what we're talking about today, that thinking about how projects to improve active travel impact differently on different groups. Obviously today's conference is all about gender, but we know that various policies can impact, can have a very different impact on different age groups, on people from different socioeconomic groups, as well as gender. And there's a process called health impact assessment that can be used to be applied to projects as they're being developed, and it can really help to flag up how policy may impact differently on different groups as well as on health as a whole. And if you're interested in hearing more about that, it has been applied to a project in Kells late last year called Active Travel Routes for Kells. In terms of, I don't need to tell you this, but it was certainly a strong recommendation that we made, that really government should continue to support the very good investment that we've seen in recent years. The evidence is there. Unfortunately, sometimes even evidence-based research that shows that something works isn't sufficient reason for continued funding, as we know. But we certainly are very active in this area within the Institute in terms of our work has been used to support smarter travel fund applications and policy submissions and so on. And I think the final point in terms of striving for a balance between a carrot and a stick approach, that while certainly we would always support any mechanisms to increase active travel, it has to be balanced and there has to be a realistic alternative to people. And I suppose one point that I didn't make there, but I'd just like to say is that we do need better data and also more emphasis on non-commuting journeys. A lot of the programmes, a lot of the research, a lot of the data we have at the moment is around those journeys of children going to school or people going to work, and programmes to encourage walking and cycling on those journeys. We neither have the data or really the evidence to show the benefits of using walking and cycling more routinely in everyday life. So if you're going to the shops or if you're going to visit your friend, you don't automatically jump in the car, even though you wouldn't think about any other route except the bike for work. So that's it. If anyone would like to get in contact with me, these are my contact details, and thank you for listening.